Massachusetts, who's on the Armed Services Committee. He attended the Munich Security Conference over the weekend. Congressman, what was the mood in Munich, and how is that carrying over to the meeting in Saudi Arabia tomorrow?
Well, let me just talk about the mood, Ali, in the room for that speech. It was one of absolute shock among our European allies, among basically everyone in the audience. I think many of us Americans just felt totally embarrassed as VP Vance delivered really not a speech, but a condescending lecture about the fundamental tenets of democracy to our European allies. And what was most remarkable is just how hypocritical this speech was. He talked about respecting election results. He talked about not jailing your political opponents, and he talked about not censoring the media. The problem is that this is coming from a man who himself won't acknowledge the 2020 election results. This is a day after Trump said he should jail the opponents, the members of the January 6th committee, his political opponents. And this administration just kicked the AP out of the Pentagon and is censoring dozens of words from government publications, keeping Americans in the dark while they take reams of data off the internet. So the utter hypocrisy was met with a room full of hundreds of people, a couple hundred people, and about 5 of them applauded. I think 4 of them were Chinese. It was only the Chinese and the Russians who liked the speech. The Russian foreign minister actually came out and praised the speech. That's the only praise you've heard about what VP Vance had to say.
Notable when you break down the response like that. And so as someone who was in the room, both hearing that and then the reaction from world leaders, the word I keep hearing is stunned. What did you say to them in response about this next era of American foreign policy led by President Trump?
Well, of course, in private, the Republicans that I was with at the conference were embarrassed by this speech as well. They're very scared of Trump, so they're reluctant to say anything in public. I did hear Senator Wicker notably say some things publicly, which was good to hear. But what happened in the meetings to follow were Democrats and Republicans from the congressional delegation, House and Senate, sitting with European leaders and trying to reassure them, and trying to say Congress here is united in a bipartisan way with Ukraine. We stand with Ukraine. We do not approve of the administration's moves to negotiate just with Russia. We don't approve of what Secretary Hegseth, the Fox News personality, did just a day before, basically selling out the Ukrainians by giving away our biggest leverage in the negotiation, saying that it was unrealistic for Ukraine to get its sovereign borders back and for Ukraine to ever join NATO. So what the delegation was trying to do is make up for the administration, but the result was chaos. And our European leaders, with whom we have stood strong in NATO to prevent wars in Europe ever since World War II, they feel really lost and they feel abandoned as allies.
But you once again bring up a scenario that may seem familiar to viewers. It certainly feels familiar to me as a reporter in Washington, this idea that privately Republicans are having different reactions than they are willing to have publicly. I do take the point that Senator Wicker at least offered some public on-the-record criticism in Munich around the way that Pete Hegseth had been talking about the potential concessions to end the Ukrainian conflict. But where does that leave your Republican colleagues there? And is this one of the issues that they might be willing, should the Trump administration continue down this path of reorienting towards Russia? Is this an issue where they might be willing to offer some rare condemnation publicly?
Well, I would certainly hope so, because freedom and democracy
but did they tell you that?
The future stability of Europe are on the line. But no, they didn't tell me that because, frankly, they're being cowards. They're really just so scared of Trump. They're so scared that he'll primary them, get them kicked out of office or whatnot, that they're unwilling to do the right thing. I mean, you saw Republicans cave on the nominations of people like Hegseth, who some of them publicly opposed before coming around to Trump's view. And what's most dangerous about this is what one Republican advisor told me after the speech was that, you know, a lot of us were talking about how it was embarrassing, how it was out of touch, how it was selling out the Ukrainians. But he said to me, Seth, if you listen carefully, it's actually much deeper and darker. He was talking about the enemy within. This is some of the same language that Hitler used to justify the Holocaust. Just after the speech, Vice President Vance went to the old Nazi Party headquarters in Munich to meet with the leader of the modern-day neo-Nazi party in Germany. So what was bad at Munich could actually get worse. this is a very, very dangerous administration. I think our European allies are just coming to terms with it. The Republicans in Congress have yet to find the courage to do something about it back here at home.